What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast. Katie Mox and John Breech here, filling in for Will Brinson. And as you already know, this is our All 32 series where we catch you up with insiders from every team and give you the need-to-know information heading into the season. Today, we are talking the Atlanta Falcons. It's actually a bummer that Will Brinson isn't here because he's very high on the Falcons this year, but we are going to welcome in writer for the Falcoholic and also the host of Believe in Falcons, Will McFadden. How's it going, Will?
It's going great, Katie. Really excited to talk some Falcons football with you guys. Enjoying the last little bit of kind of the dead period before training camp starts next week. But I'm really excited to get back out there, be around everybody, and see what all the talk is about.
And let me just say real quick, it is not a bummer that Brinson's not here, Katie. Because first of all, I'm here. Second of all, if Brinson had been here, Will wouldn't have gotten a single word in because Brinson would have spent the entire podcast talking about how much he loves the Falcons and how much he's on the Falcons bandwagon. And so definitely for the best that Brinson's not here today.
That is actually a very good point. All right, well, so let's just get right into it. For the first time in what feels like years, a very long time, there is actually some buzz heading into the Falcons, training camp. It feels like maybe we're out of the rebuilding woods that you guys have been in for the last couple of years and into competitive territory, especially in a pretty favorable division like the NFC South. What is the general feeling in the building right now?
I mean, I do think, like you said, it's kind of coming out of the woods. Part of that was financial. Part of that was just, the natural ebbs and flows of life in the NFL. But really, when Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot arrived here before the 2021 season, I think a lot of people did pencil 2023 because of the financial, landfall that they got this offseason and that they were able to spend, in my opinion, pretty wisely. But yeah, it's been a while for the Falcons. It's been, going on kind of like 6 years now that they've been absent from the playoffs. And the last two times they were in the playoffs, they made some noise. So it kind of felt like, from at least a fan perspective, okay, like things are building. The good times are ahead of us, not behind us. And they have proven to be behind a lot of people here in Atlanta. But I think from an organizational standpoint, there are question marks, but if those questions get answered, this has the chance to be a team with the most upside of any that I've been around here in Atlanta, maybe since the 2018 season, which I thought was very talented, but then injuries really, really hurt that team just right from the jump. But if things break the right way for Atlanta this year, they can definitely capitalize on, like you said, a really weak division.
Well, I love that you use the word some question marks because it feels like the biggest question mark is, drum roll, Desmond Ridder. I mean, it feels like the whole entire season hinges on whether this guy is a franchise quarterback or not a franchise quarterback. What have you seen? What do you think? Is he going to be good enough to carry the offense?
Yeah, I mean, that is the big question, right? And I went back and I recently rewatched his final four games, the four games that he started last season. He did get better in every single one of those starts. Still not perfect, right? Still some missed throws, still some missed reads. But the Falcons have said from kind of the jump, since they drafted him, they've praised his leadership. They've praised the intangibles, his smarts, his ability to pick up and understand this offense, which is going to be big because it is a complex and complicated offense and with a lot of moving pieces. And that's something Marcus Mariota did well last season, was kind of be running the show and keeping everything moving smoothly. So if Desmond Ridder can do that, I don't know if he's the type of quarterback who is going to, at least in year two, elevate the offense, right? He's got the tools required to be a decent quarterback in the NFL, but he doesn't have Patrick Mahomes tools, right? So he's not going to be this type of, we're building an offense truly around this singular type of talent this guy has. What I think he needs to do for the Falcons to be successful, and I believe he can do this, is he needs to play within and elevate from within the scheme and not elevate the scheme as a whole, but kind of elevate the offense through the scheme because he's executing the scheme the way it's been designed to be executed. And so if he shows some of those flashes of improvement in the deep ball, his accuracy, kind of the timing, some of these small things that can be improved, then yeah, again, I think that Desmond Ridder can be good enough to get Atlanta back into the playoffs in 2023. And if he's not, they spent a decent amount of money on Taylor Heineke as the backup. So they've got a contingency plan in place, but obviously they would like plan 1A, Desmond Ridder, to work out this season.
Well, let me ask you that real quick. Sorry, Kate. It's really, really early to bring this up and try and start a QB controversy. Do you think Desmond Ridder, I mean, obviously he is going to be the week 1 starter. Do you think he is the undisputed starter for the entire season? Or do you think they would get to a point week 8, 9, or 10 and be like, all right, this is a lost cause if we want to have any shot at the playoffs? Because we'll say every team in the NFC South is under 500 at that point, so you're not out of it. Do you think they would turn to Taylor Heineke? Do you think he's an insurance policy, or do you think he is just the true backup who will only play if Ridder gets hurt?
I think he's an insurance policy in 2 ways. I think he's an insurance policy in case Desmond Ridder has them, around 500 midway through the season. And let's say he does get nicked up and he's got to miss 2 or 3 games and they don't want to absolutely, waste all that momentum they've built. I think Taylor Heineke is a perfect spot starter for that reason. But I do also think that Taylor Heineke is somebody who is well respected in the locker room, who shows kind of this spark ability, like Ryan Fitzpatrick has back in the day, where maybe if things are going south, is he the right type of person to throw into the mix to kind of turn things around and get the ship righted in a crucial year? Yeah, I think that there is some element to Taylor Heineke like that. So for that reason, I'm not going to say that they're going to pull the plug, hastily on Desmond Ridder, because I do think that they really want to give him every opportunity. But, I don't think they're committed to him for the full season. If there is a chance for them to still make the playoffs, if he's truly kind of the one thing holding them back, come mid-season, I don't know if they would be afraid to pull the plug at that point. Just right now, it seems to be full steam ahead with Desmond Ridder.
You talk about pulling the plug. I don't know if you watch. I'm assuming that you have the quarterback documentary on Netflix, and obviously Marcus Mariota in there, and he abruptly leaves, in the middle of the season. I'm just curious to know your thoughts about that. And in watching it, it seemed to me like it was just even more abrupt in watching it on quarterback than when it was coming out in the news. But what did you think?
Well, first off, Katie, I'm only 3 episodes into that, so you just spoiled the season finale, I think, of quarterback. So, I mean, gosh, now I guess I don't have to finish that. No,
sorry.
I obviously, having lived through it, I can kind of speak to that. I'm really curious to see how it all has unfolded in the quarterback series. But yeah, that was something that was a little bit of a surprise at the time. My wife and I had our first kid in December, and I know that Marcus, and his wife had a child right around then as well. So as kind of a new father, I could sympathize with him a little bit, where it's, hey, last 4 games of the season, not a playoff team, I just got benched. Am I doing the day in and day out grind that a football team, and a football player is required to do? Or do I want to spend that time at home with a newborn and help out my wife and all of that? It's really easy to sit here and say, yeah, you signed a contract, you got to be out there and be with the team. And that is probably the right answer. But I also did want to give a little leeway to the human side of things as well, because I was going through a very similar situation myself. And I really liked being home with my son. But from a team standpoint, I mean, I think that's maybe it did a lot to ingratiate players to Desmond Ridder, because when you when the former captain, is no longer around on the ship, makes it a little bit easier to embrace the new one without being reminded of what you had, or there's some disgruntlement in the room or anything like that. I think that Desmond Ridder could have benefited from some of the coaching, some of the advice, some of that leadership that maybe Marcus could have been around to provide. But he does have former NFL quarterbacks like Dave Ragone and TJ Yates in the room as well. And so I think if anything, it just more tarnished Marcus Mariota's reputation and legacy here in Atlanta. And I think beforehand, a lot of people considered him, a pretty good guy, didn't have too much to think about him, but generally positive vibes. Now, not so much. And it's a shame that that's how his time here in Atlanta ended, because of the way that his time in Tennessee with Arthur Smith ended. Yeah. So, that just kind of continues on. But yeah, I can't wait to see kind of from the Marcus side of things, how it all unfolds.
Gosh, Katie.
I know. Didn't mean to do that. Okay, we are going to take a quick break here. When we come back, Bijan Robinson. Let's discuss that. You're watching Pick Six. We will be right back. All right. Well, Atlanta really didn't need to draft a running back this season. You know, you got Cordell Patterson, you got Algier. I always mess up his name, both with 1,000-yard seasons, but you went and you got Bijan Robinson, number 8 overall. We haven't seen a running back prospect like this since maybe Saquon Barkley in 2018. And if you think about that, in an Arthur Smith offense, who was responsible for Derrick Henry in that 2019-2020 season, how hyped are we for Bijan Robinson? What can we expect?
I'm personally very excited because of what I think it's going to unlock creatively in what was already one of the most creative offenses in the NFL, and particularly from a run game standpoint, which is boring, right? It's much more fun to see kind of a creative, I think, passing attack than it is a creative run game. But when you watch the ways that Arthur Smith and his offense were able to kind of manufacture leverage blocks for offensive linemen, which like that's not usually when you see kind of like a huge inside out blindside block on a defensive end and it's a 300-pound guy doing it. But that's the situation that he was able to put his offensive linemen in, which really sprung, the running backs and allowed this run game to really, really be effective all throughout the season. There wasn't really kind of a dip at any period. And so you plug somebody like Bijan Robinson into the mix. I do wonder how much of this is he going to be a pure running back versus in the player. I know a lot of like Saquon Barkley comps and even Christian McCaffrey comps, and both of those are warranted. I really like to think of him as kind of like a running back version of a Deebo Samuel, who's like a wide receiver version of just this kind of like crazy weapon on offense.
Yeah.
And I think that if you've got Tyler Algier as still your main running back, your early down running back, and he led the Falcons, 210 carries last season. You've got Cordell Patterson. I think they're going to probably give him the ball, hand off the ball to him a little bit less. I think they're going to use him in a little bit more of a gadget way than they did last season, because he carried the ball 144 times. Bijan Robinson, where are those kind of carries coming from? There were 3 players, Marcus Mariota, Caleb Huntley, Avery Williams, who combined for 183 carries. That's basically where I think Bijan Robinson fits in there. I would put a lot of those carries on his plate, so you don't have to take too many away from your other 2 really talented players. But then I think he is going to essentially be at times like your number 2 or number 3 receiver. You didn't see a ton of volume from him in the passing game last year at Texas, but that was kind of just because of what they needed him to be in that offense. The times that you did, and we saw the highlights, I mean, he is so effective in that aspect. And that is the part where I think you're really going to see the Falcons unlock him this year. So it's going to be just kind of an overall package that they're going to be able to fold into an offense that they really do consider positionless. I mean, they consider everybody on this offense to be able to do kind of a little bit of everything. And that's going to give, I think Arthur Smith this massive Cheesecake Factory type of playbook to work with, and it's going to be so much fun.
It does seem like the Falcons ran. I went to a Cheesecake Factory 2 weeks ago, and that menu is absurd. It's a great analogy. By the time you get through the whole entire menu, even if you even make it that far, you're 10 times more hungry than you already were, and then you fill up an appetizer. It's just insane. Okay, but with Arthur Smith, it feels like he's running one of the most unorthodox offenses we've seen in the NFL. And I think that's a big reason why we saw so much success from the Falcons last season. Sure, they went 7-10, but I mean, there were 2 or 3 games there they probably should have won. Week 1 against the Saints, the one with the bad roughing call against the Buccaneers with Tom Brady. You give them those 2 wins, they win the division. And so I think it felt like they caught a lot of teams off guard and kind of surprised opposing defenses. Because I think some people might be wondering, like Katie was just asking, why draft Bijan Robinson? And it's because Arthur Smith, it just gives them another toy to play with and to throw into this unorthodox offense. But it also feels like maybe he's trying to create an offense, not like Kyle Shanahan, but similar to Kyle Shanahan in the sense where it doesn't necessarily matter who your quarterback is, where Shanahan has created this plug and play system where anyone can succeed. And as long as you have a competent quarterback, your offense can put up some numbers. So do you think that's kind of what he's trying to do? And by getting these guys in there and taking pressure off Desmond Ridder, since you don't know, how good he can be.
Yeah, I think that kind of like San Francisco, the run game is the quarterback of this offense, right? Like it is the star of the show, and everything else falls off of that. And really what, I think, because you're seeing across the league more defenses go to these cover 2, cover 4 defenses to really prevent, basically everybody in the AFC. But what I think the Falcons want to do is draw them out of that back into these single high looks that are much easier to attack, because the simplicity is an advantage for the defense. And it's why, Seattle and their famous cover 3, because they had elite athletes and playmakers. They knew what offenses were going to do to attack them, because, the book on cover 3 is out there and cover 1 is out there. But because they also knew what teams were going to do, they could kind of bait them into it and then make these big plays. That's what bit the Falcons, I think, at the tail end of the Dan Quinn era, is they didn't have the players to execute on the simplicity of that scheme. So the Falcons are aware that they know how to attack those schemes, and they're going to draw defenses down into the box with these single high safeties. Then they're going to let loose Kyle Pitts and Drake London and Cordell Patterson and these bigger bodied guys to go win these one-on-one matchups. And so, I think you're seeing the framework of how this team wants to win. And you talk about these 1-score games. Adding more of just playmaker, one more playmaker on this offense. And I think Bijan Robinson, like, that is what I would call him, is he's just here to be a playmaker. He's here to hit some of these 40-yard touchdowns that they frankly didn't have a lot of last season. They get a couple more of those big explosive plays. And we're talking about a team that last year could have been in the playoffs. I mean, bring it back to quarterback. At the end of those first 3 games, I was reminded again, they lost that Saints game after going into the fourth quarter with a huge lead. They shouldn't have won that Rams game in week 2, but they did have the ball and they were driving, and they could have won if Marcus Mariota doesn't throw that pick in the end zone. And then, kind of the third week, a similar story. So that is a case where they're so close. Now, can they just get over the hump? And I kind of feel like if they do, like, I wouldn't be surprised if we are sitting here talking about the Falcons with kind of double-digit wins, because maybe when they come, they start coming in bunches.
Brinson's nodding somewhere, agreeing.
Brinson is very excited. I mean, look, we look at your win total. It's at 8.5 with that over juice to -130. And, this division feels so wide open. The Bucs won last year with a losing record. Okay. And there's been so much that has changed in this division. Right now, Atlanta is the second favorite to take the division at +240, followed only by the Saints, who, they have Derek Carr, but there's still a lot of question marks with the Saints. How are you feeling about these odds, +240, to take the division? And, you said double-digit wins, 8.5. Feels like you're leaning towards that over.
Yeah, I would definitely lean towards the over, especially, if you take a look at the Falcons schedule, it's not very much. So I think that part of that, again, has to do with the division. The division, it feels very tight, right? Exactly like it was last season, where you have 3 teams finish with the exact same 7-10 record, and then an 8-9 team wins the division. So that right there, like, everybody is so close together. So for that reason, why not the Falcons? I weirdly think that the Panthers could be their closest competition. I don't mean that as a slight to New Orleans, because I'm a huge fan of Chris Olave. I'm not too much of a Saints hater to admit that he's freaking
You
good.
don't call them the Aints?
No, not too much. But Chris Olave is going to be so much fun. But I just think that if we're looking at upside and we're looking at if a team could become the best version of itself, which team wins the division, and I truly do believe that the Falcons probably present the most upside, at least this year, of these teams. Now, if you're telling me, all right, Bryce Young, let's say he becomes truly Bryce Young in the NFL, then like, you could argue that maybe the Panthers have more upside or what have you. But again, like I said in the beginning, if some of these question marks go in the Falcons' direction, then we're looking at a team that definitely, I think, is making some noise in the NFC this year.
So if somebody gave you $100 right now and said, go bet on one of these 4 teams to win NFC South, would it be the Falcons?
Yeah. Because I think they're going to. I think they're going to win the NFC South. And so for that reason, I mean, like, if truly it's just $100 and I don't care, I'm probably picking Tampa Bay at this point, just because those odds are awesome.
It's 1,000 then. It's 1,000.
Yeah. All right. Well, if it's 1,000, I only place one bet.
Only
one bet on the
I'm
NFC
going
Falcons.
Falcons.
One bet for the rest of your life.
It's crazy because the one thing I will say real quick about the Falcons is just that it does feel like they have probably the first or second best roster in the division, but also probably the worst quarterback, depending on how you feel about Bryce Young right now, because I would take Baker Mayfield at this point over Desmond Ridder and obviously Derek Carr. And so there's that conundrum of just, we started the podcast off with, you don't know what you're getting in Desmond Ridder. So, but yeah, man, it is, the Falcons look good. And yeah, I would do the same thing with the $1,000. Maybe we should do it, Will.
Maybe we should, but I would say too that there's a chance that, come week 4, like that Desmond Ridder, Baker Mayfield feeling that you have is totally reversed, right? And so that's what I think, again, I'm betting on is Baker Mayfield. We know at this point, Desmond Ridder, we don't. We haven't seen anything like too amazing from him yet, but he's only in his second year, and I think the upside is there. So that, again, is what I would be betting on, is I'm betting on not what they are right now, but what they can be come November, come December, and what we've seen from a coaching staff that I think is competent enough to get them to be playing their best ball kind of right at that time. So yeah, it's an upside play for me, but I think this division is going to be, once again, pretty muddled.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I do want a lot of people are going to be betting on Bijan Robinson coming up in this season. He was rated fairly high on Madden, never played in the NFL yet. Some people are up in arms about it. You seem to think that he's going to be more of the Deebo Samuel kind of wide back, and looking at his season rushing yards prop, 1,075 and a half. Would you lean under on that because you think he's going to be utilized more as a receiver?
Ooh, yeah, that's a really good one. And I wonder if that is why the line is what it is, right? Because you would think that for, basically like the favorite, I think right now for offensive rookie of the year as a running back, you're probably looking at like 1,200, 1,300 in a 17 game season. I would still take the over because I think the volume is still going to be there and that he is going to be good enough, and injuries happen, right? Like the Falcons have been very lucky on the injury front these last 2 years, but the running back position, you never know. And a loaded room can quickly become a pretty threadbare room very quickly in this league. So I do think that if Bijan Robinson stays healthy, stays throughout the season, then he's going to be able to top this number on the ground.
One more from you, Breech.
You know what? They're not having a kicking competition, Katie. So that's off. I will ask you, Will, since we didn't really talk about the defense, real quick. We're looking at adding Jesse Bates, Jeff Okudah. This really feels like a very underrated defense, and I know that necessarily hasn't been a strength of the Falcons over the past few years. But would you agree that this defense could be pretty stacked this year? Because that's what it feels like.
You are definitely right in that they have not had a great defense the last few years. This year, it definitely does feel as though things are trending in the right direction and pretty quickly. They didn't add that star pass rusher, right? And outside of Jesse Bates, you can quibble how many stars did they kind of add. Calais Campbell's certainly a huge household name at this point in his career. I don't know if he is that dominant, like we need to do everything we can to stop this guy force. But what the Falcons did do defensively is that they raised their floor considerably. The depth, light years better than what it has been in recent years. The kind of maybe 4 through 11 players on the starting defense, I think are better. There's some young guys that they're going to need to step up. Somebody like Troy Anderson, Richie Grant, can he take another step next to Jesse Bates and benefit from that? But you look up and down this defense now, and you do have guys like Bud Dupree and David Onyemata, and the front is so much better. Jeff Okudah, who you mentioned, like he is going to be my X factor, I think, for camp. The player that I just cannot wait to get my eyes on, because I loved him so much coming out of Ohio State and just how smooth and confident and everything I would want in a corner. I totally got why he went 3rd overall. Coming off of his best season as a pro, and a lot of that has to do with injuries, can he build on that? Can he look like 80% of what we saw coming out in the draft? And if he can, then yeah, it's going to be kind of tough to necessarily find a true weakness on this Falcons defense, which if you'd have told me that at the end of last season, like going into this year, we will be able to say there's just not a real weakness on this defense. I'll take it. We may still be another offseason or 2 away from saying that this defense is a strength, but if they're 16th to 13th in the league and the Falcons offense is kind of what it has been the last 2 years, then I think that's a recipe that the Falcons will absolutely take.
All right. Well, the vibes are high for the Falcons. Will Brinson would be very proud of us because we're throwing $1,000 on the Falcons plus 240 to take the division. Thank you so much to Will McFadden. Stay tuned for more All 32 with daily drops in your podcast feed and on YouTube. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe on this. And if you're listening to audio only, download, follow, leave a 5-star review, and tell your friends to listen and watch the pod. Will McFadden, great name, by the way. Love the last name. Thanks for coming on, Talking Falcons, and good luck this season.
And the first name, Brinson.
Yes. Yeah.
Whole package over here. Thank you guys so much. It was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.